Hello, all. Now we understand the concepts about normalization and know how to apply the three normal forms based upon what we covered last week. It's now time to kind of put it all together in regards to what we've been doing the entire time throughout this course. Up to this point, or I should say, really up to the time when we start talking about normalization, you have designed based upon the requirements. And hopefully, what you have seen as you went through that design, and also now that we covered normalization, is that for the most part, we have been normalizing our databases as we've been designing our databases. So I don't want you to lose that. I still feel that's the exact way you should be creating your databases from scratch when it comes to understanding design and the requirements and so on. But what I want us to do now is, based upon our entire design, go back and reanalyze those tables that we designed, okay, and we'll look at it one more time to make sure that they're normalized based upon the three normal forms that we've already covered. And that's what this video is about. Okay, going back to the student courses and instructors that we did a while ago in regards to our design, as you can see, we have these three entities come about. I think it's important that we keep our design at a level that I call almost a super entity, meaning we don't get down to the brass details in regards to every maybe entities that might be derived based upon second normal form and third normal form. Specifically, if we look at this, hopefully all you guys will recognize that race should probably be normalized based upon second normal form. It could be repeating. When I'm going through a design, I don't think you should be worrying about race. Right now, that's defining that student. Let's not worry about taking that out. I think the best approach in designing a database from a design point of view is keep everything at a high level and keeping what I'll call the super entities as part of your design. And then once you complete that in regards to, based upon what we actually found here, many-to-many relationship, so thus we have to have a students to course table, and you develop it just like we did here. Then what I want you to do, once you have all these super entities, if you will, my term, not anybody else's term, defined and developed, is to go back and reassess each table that you've developed. And then with that, determine if there's any need to break it out based upon first normal form, second normal form, or third normal form. Though I don't want to guarantee it, but I can almost assume it that the majority of the time, if you designed your database correctly from scratch, the way we were taught to do it, and the way you have been doing it thus far, I don't believe you'll ever have an issue with first normal form. I don't want to say never, because every time I do that, it'll come back to bite me. But I firmly believe that most of the time, when you're looking at your tables here, you're not going to have repeating columns just because of the mere fact of how we designed our databases to begin with. The majority of things you're going to be finding is really going to be second normal form based upon repeating columns of data, redundant data in the columns, however you want to state that. And so with that, my recommendation is design like you've been doing, get it to this point where you actually have developed it, and reassess and try to find anything that doesn't meet first, second, or third normal form. With that said, if we look at students, is it in first, second, and third normal form? In first normal form, it is. In second normal form, it is not, because race could be potentially repeating. And if we look at the data, I'm sure it is. Based upon our discussion of overnormalization, I don't think first name, last name, address, city is, I don't know, what do you want to say? That's a 50-50 shot. If you want to normalize it, normalize it. So in the end, what we would do with this database is we would then break out new tables and replace them with the foreign keys. So in this case here, I would create a city table, a state table. Date of birth, once again, going back to overnormalization, I'm not sure I can maintain a table of dates, even though there might be some redundant dates, meaning more than one person is born on the same day in this table. I'm not sure I'm going to break that out. Race, of course, I'm going to break that out. There's a limitation on how many races there are in the entire world, And with that, I should be able to very easily create a table that represents all those races. So in that case, what I would do is if I walk through this is once again, I would break out a city table, a state table, and a race table just from the students. Once I'm finished with that, I would go to my next. Is there anything in courses? Based upon how we develop this particular course table, I don't want to get too complex with this. I think it's okay. There might be a reason I'm giggling on that is because there's a lot of ways of doing these courses in regards to if the start dates, the sections, and so on. And if we actually developed a database with all that complexity to it, I think there'll be some things being broken out of the courses table. Student courses, for the most part, is the many table, and with instructors, once again, city and state might be things we would break out. Interesting enough, the same tables we broke out for the student table can be used, obviously, and linked back to the instructor table when it comes to city and state. Okay? With that said, that's what I would go ahead and do. So if I were you, I would sit back and I would break those out piece by piece just by analyzing it. If we look at third normal form, if there's anything else in here that we sit back and say doesn't really functionally depend upon the primary key, I would break that out also. But I don't believe there's anything in any of these particular tables that would result in that. So in the end, I would add 3 new tables, city, state, and race, and then be completely done with my entire database. Make sure when you do it, you follow the rules that was created when it came to second normal form, meaning you would create the table, create a primary key of that table, and then put the foreign key of that table in the originating table, which would be this right here, representing the city and the state. Does that make sense? I'm not going to go ahead and I'm not going to do this right now just for the mere fact of the time it would create to do it. But hopefully by talking through it, you completely understand exactly what I'm talking about. Make sure when you complete that, obviously we have now new foreign keys. And so obviously there'll be a foreign key in the child table of the students and the instructors going back to the city and one going back to the state. And then of course one with the race for the students. And the column would be city ID, state ID, and finally the race ID. Create those alters. There'll be 3 new alters in that. And finally, fix your inserts when we go about through this. So when you go through this now, we instead of having the city here, obviously it's going to be replaced with foreign keys. Same for state and same for race. Okay, for students. Make sense? Once you're finished with all that, you now have a normalized database. All right. So the process. Do exactly what we have taught for the first 6 weeks of this course. Design your database accordingly based upon understanding the entities, the relationships of the entities, and so on. I would keep them at a super entity type level. All right. And again, what you define as a super entity is really not important. For some of you, you might add an entity or 2 to your design where others may not. Regardless, in the end, when you come to this piece right here, when we're in the situation of now we have designed our database and built it physically, and now I analyze all my tables to break it out. Regardless how much you broke out initially, it still should all be the same and all work accordingly. I call these other little entities that we're looking at here, sub-entities basically. And these sub-entities will be ones that we're going to break out during this phase of completing our normalized database. If you have a handle on all that, and this all makes good sense to you, you've now completed the whole thing in regards to designing a database from scratch. And that's great, okay? So you might be asking, what are we gonna do now? Well, we're gonna keep practicing, okay? It's nice to know how to do it, but I think it's also good to be able to keep practicing as we keep going on. And we'll also learn a lot more about SQL, aggregates in SQL, subqueries, and so on. But once again, we're gonna practice with some more complex problems as we move through the rest of the semester. But if you got this down, you have it, and good for you, all right? So I want you to go practice on your assignments this week, going back to some of the previous designs from previous assignments, and make sure you have those completely normalized based upon what we have discussed now in regards to normalization. With that, I wish you luck.